What's shaking, you guys? Welcome back to the Let's Go Win podcast, where we are here to help you be happy, healthy, wealthy, and get better every single day. We're going to be talking about building teams. We're going to be talking about sales, but we're also going to talk about truly being the best leader you can be. How does that look with vulnerability? How does that look with really sharing a piece of you? And we have an absolute expert that is going to share with us today. With over 15 years of corporate experience in the medical tech and bio-pharmaceutical industry, Danielle Cobo knows how to build high-performing teams, increases sales, productivity, and employee retention. Her expertise includes corporate resilience and heart-centered leadership. Danielle is the best-selling author of Unstoppable Grit, Break Through the 7 Roadblocks Standing Between You and Achieving Your Goals, and hosts the globally top-rated podcast Unstoppable Grit, which I'll be a part of. What a powerful episode that was. Danielle shared so much about her journey, and right out of the gate, I mean, it was just, wow, what she went through with her mom, her dad, then her mom again, then, so much happened in her life. I understand immediately why she wrote the book she did, Unstoppable Grit, because this woman is a powerful, powerful person to overcome so many adversities and yet still smile on the other side. There's just so much in this episode. We do talk about business towards the latter part, but so much of it was really about how to show up as the best you, how to, when everything's not okay, put on that best face, or make sure to take care of yourself so you can. As I'm rewinding in my mind all the story that she weaved in there, I mean, it just started with such a bang right out of the gate, and it's amazing to see all that she's accomplished. And yet it's not like she had legs up everywhere. She literally created it through a lot of adversities, through a lot of challenges, and like I said, kept smiling throughout. This is just a powerful story. I mean, this podcast, we weaved in some of the business stuff because she's crushed it in that side. But I have to tell you, it's more of a human story. This was really hearing somebody go through some challenges and yet continues to smile, continues to just show up as the best version of her. And you're going to be inspired. That, if I could have every show know that you're going to be inspired by the end of it, this one absolutely knocked it out of the park. So you're going to enjoy it. There's no question about it. Make sure to share this, you guys. Literally, people are going through challenges, and to hear Danielle's story, to hear how she overcame imposter syndrome, how she overcame resistance to change, how she overcame major family tragedies, and yet still came out smiling and admittedly saying there's still tough days right now, but this is how I continue to move forward. It's just a powerful episode. So please make sure to share it out, like and subscribe. Let's keep growing this thing, having amazing guests like Danielle on, and enjoy the show. Danielle, welcome to the show. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good today. It's a great day.
You know what? Every day above Earth, it is a great day for sure.
That is true.
You just had a book come out, by the way. Congratulations. Unstoppable Grit. 2 pretty powerful words, and you put them together. How did you choose these 2 words? Because I love it. I'm really interested in reading it, but how did you choose on the title?
Because grit has always been a core value of mine, or something that has been a strength within me. And people always ask, how is it that you're always able to bounce back from challenges and keep moving forward? And it boils down to grit. Angela Duckworth did a TED Talk and she wrote a book on grit. She's kind of been known for that word, and it's passion and perseverance towards long-term goals. And so one of the things is how do you get grittier? And that's what I talk about in the book.
Was this something that came to you naturally? You learned it from your folks? It was something that because I agree, grit is, when I look at whether somebody's successful or not, it kind of comes down to, did they continue to persevere with passion and continue going? But was that something that came naturally to you?
I believe it was innate within me, but it was also nurtured. My mom was, when I was 2.5 years old, my parents got divorced. My mom was a single mom. And so she modeled for me grit and tenacity and resilience. When I was 5 years old, she was going back to school. She was getting her bachelor's degree. She was cocktailing at a restaurant nearby. She was raising a 5 year old by herself. And so she really modeled for me that ability to say, okay, you can change your circumstances if you put the time and the effort and the action in place. And so I saw her go from us having nothing, where we lived in a 1 bedroom apartment. My bedroom or my bed was in the living room. And most of the times we ate SpaghettiOs and mac and cheese and top ramen. That's what we were able to afford. And I saw her rise up the corporate ladder in the medical sales industry. And she actually became a regional sales manager for one of the top pharmaceutical companies in the world. So I saw her go from nothing to being highly successful. And I believe she really modeled for me what grit is. And I also believe through my own circumstances, I learned what grit was. Despite my mom and being a single mom, my mom and I had a very beautiful, but an also very broken relationship. My mom actually took me from my dad when I was 2 years old. So my dad showed up, went to pick me up one day, and the entire house was empty. I ended up not meeting him till I was 15 years old. My mom also was suffered from some mental illness things. And so a lot of our relationship was high highs and low lows, and I was kicked out at 17. I ended up working full time while going to school, while trying to pay for school on my own. And so I kind of looked at life and saying, you are not a victim of your circumstances. You can change your circumstances, but it's up to you to make it happen. And so that's why I say it was innate, with it was also nurtured, and it was also modeled for me.
Yeah, interesting how you had the positive side of things, and yet I imagine 2 to, I think you said 15, reintroduced to your dad. There's some stuff there. There's some, I imagine, some anger, some. There's a lot to unpack there with your
Yeah.
mom to say, hey, I'm sure you were trying to make the right decision at the time, but what the heck, man? Like, how did that look for you? And I will dive
Yeah.
more into your business side, but this is a big thing, and I'm curious how that relationship has played out for you, both with your dad and your mom through this challenging time. My goodness.
Yeah, so the first 15 years, I guess, were those years of my life where my dad was gone. I was told that he took off on us, that he chose another family. So for many of my years of my upbringing, I had this not feeling like I was loved, feeling like I wasn't good enough. Like he chose another family, but he didn't choose me. What was it about me that I wasn't good enough for him? And that has played out in many areas within my life, even in business, where that's been a struggle for me, of this unworthiness. And then also, when with my mom, there was a lot of anger there when I eventually found out that she took me from him. There was a lot of anger, there was a lot of resentment, there was a lot of distrust. I felt like she manipulated me, and I don't know the reason why she ended up taking me from my father. My mom and I had an estranged relationship for the past 13 years, until she ended up passing in 2020. So I don't even know the reason why. So there's a lot of unanswered questions that I have, which also plays into this. I lost my mom to suicide in March of 2020. So there's also this guilt and shame associated with a lot of emotions that go into this whole story of what my upbringing is. But I also look at it as everything is meant to happen for a purpose, and I don't understand the reasons why certain decisions were made, but it also has shaped me into who I am today, both the good qualities about me and then also the areas that I get to develop within me.
Well, you and I share that. I lost my dad 2 years ago to suicide. And, there are certain questions you'll never have answered or
Um,
until we meet in another afterlife, I suppose. But so I feel your pain there. And at the same time, one of the things I'm hearing from you is this is outside of my control, and this does not dictate. I am not going to be a victim. I am choosing to be a victor. Talk to me a little bit about that, because I talk about it often on my show.
mhm.
I don't think it can be repeated enough that as awful as that is, both your mom taking you from your dad for whatever reason, that's a lot of stuff there. Then losing her the way you did, there's a lot there, but yet you continue using grit or perseverance or whatever that is. I will go with grit in this conversation. Um, yeah, how has that gone for you to really say this is outside of my control and it hurts and it sucks? However, it doesn't define who I am.
It comes down to choice. We can either choose to dwell in the circumstances, or we can choose to say, these are part of my story, and I get to work on rewriting the story of what my future is going to look like. Because dwelling on the circumstances isn't going to change the circumstances. Dwelling on the circumstances doesn't serve us in life. And I am a big believer that I always, some people look at comparison and they say comparison is bad. And I believe that comparison can be actually very good for us. So I look at people like Denzel Washington and Oprah and the woman who, J.K. Rowling and Jamie Liam Kern and all of these very, very successful people. And I look at it and say, they came from absolutely nothing. They were faced with challenge after challenge after challenge and were wildly successful. If they can do it, I can do it. So I look at comparison as, how can I look at some of these people and say, if they've gone through these circumstances, and the only difference between a lot of the successful people out there and the people that aren't successful is, are they willing to take action to move forward when setbacks occur? And are they able to look at challenges and say, I can either learn and grow from this, or I can dwell in this. So I believe that a lot of times it comes down to choice and the different ways that we can embrace comparison to show us what's possible out there.
Yeah, there's some pretty fantastic examples of people that have come before us, have had, it's often when we're in that moment, it's like no one understands. Well, the truth is, yeah, people have gone through experiences similar, right? You and I have not met prior to today. I didn't know you had dealt with suicide in your family. And yet now immediately I bond and relate to you that much more just knowing that. Um, I'm curious with your relationship with your dad. So you lose these 13 years, and I know you were estranged from your mom then 13 years, post. How has it gone, that relationship, to reconnect with him? Was it the fairy tale ending, and has it kind of gone that way, or how did that look for you?
It was not a fairy tale, not at all. When I was 15 years old, the principal came into my classroom. I was a sophomore in high school. He came into my classroom and they said, "There's a gentleman here who says he's your father, and he's shown all the paperwork that says that he is and proven that he is. And we wouldn't normally do this, but you're at the age where you get to choose whether you want to see him or not." And I said, "Okay." Just not even knowing what to anticipate. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I went downstairs, went outside the school, and there he was crying. And my tears just started to flow down my face. And we embraced each other with a hug and said hi. And the encounter was very short. It was only about 30 minutes. And from there, I really struggled with building relationship with him because, again, I thought that he had abandoned us. I thought that he had chosen another family. I thought that he had an affair on my mom. And all of this wasn't accurate. And so I held a lot of anger and resentment towards him as well. And there were times where, but at the same time, I really longed to have a father figure in my life. I really longed to feel what it was like, especially during the time when father-daughter dances would come up. And I always felt like so alone, and I felt like I was missing out on things. So on one end, I had anger and resentment towards him, but there's the same end, I had such a longing to have a father figure in my life. And at first, I didn't really build a relationship with him. And then a couple years later, he sent me a letter saying that he had been diagnosed with colon cancer. And that just kind of reopened the conversation to us talking again. And there were times where we would talk, and then there's times where we wouldn't talk. And when I was kicked out when I was 17 from my mom's house, I ended up moving in with him after I graduated high school. So it was like I've never had a relationship with both my mom and my dad at the same time. It was kind of an either or. Gratefully, my dad and I have had a very good relationship for probably the past, well, I'd say probably 15 years. In fact, he was just here this past weekend visiting. So now we have a really good relationship. I would still say that there's a lot of unanswered questions because there's a lot of pain on his side too. I mean, understanding that I was taken from him. And there's a lot of anger and resentment towards my mom. There's a lot of pain, a lot of guilt that he has. And so it's really hard for him to talk about it. So, would I like to have a little bit more of an in depth relationship with my dad? Yes. But I'm also understanding that it's a really painful past for him as well.
Yeah, it's amazing how these events, some of the negative ones, colon cancer brings you back to your dad and builds a relationship, and yet how it can keep us separate as well. Was this really your story? And again, I'm excited to read the book. It's called Unstoppable Grit: Break Through the Seven Roadblocks Standing Between You and Achieving Your Goals. Was that really your story? Is why you said, you know what, I want others, I want to inspire others? Or what really inspired you to do it? Because writing a book is no easy feat. It's certainly a
Yeah,
hell of a lot of work.
it's a lot of work.
um what made you decide to, like, I'm going to pursue this?
So that is one of the stories in the book. It's one of them because I talk about the power of forgiveness and how with forgiveness, it's not as though we're forgiving the action of somebody, but we're releasing the anger and the resentment and the negative emotions associated with it so that we can be a better version of ourselves. So it's a story within the book. But really, what inspired me writing the book was in 2020, there were so many changes going on. And so in 2019, my husband had served a year deployment in Iraq. Our twin boys at the time were between the ages of 1.5 and 2.5 years old. So when he left, they were saying their first words. They were learning to walk. They were still in high chairs. They were still in cribs. All of a sudden, he comes back from a war zone in Iraq where right before he got home, his base was hit by 13 missiles. And I was on the phone with him when it happened. And right when he comes back, they're 2.5 years old. So they are sleeping in toddler beds now and they're formulating complete sentences and they have opinions now. So they have opinions. And it took us, it was difficult while he was gone because not only when he was gone, I was still leading a team for a Fortune 500 organization. I was still traveling every single week while balancing being the primary caregiver. And kind of four events really took place within a 6-month period. It was him coming home and navigating through what this new life of ours was going to look like with him being home from deployment. The second event was losing my mom on March 8th. And then the third event was March 13th, was when the global pandemic happened and the world shut down and the uncertainty with it. And then the fourth event was the company that I had been working for the past 7 years was acquired by another organization. And I was in a very, very toxic work environment. And I ended up leaving the organization. So all of these events, both personal and professional, had really flipped my life upside down. And it happened within a 6-month period. And right when I left corporate, I was looking for a new job. But while I was looking for a new job, I started to see how many people were they were looking at life and saying, is this really what I want? They called it the great resignation or the great transition. But a lot of people at that stage would say, I had just been part of such a this hustle culture. And all of a sudden we're stopping and we're pausing for a second and we're reflecting and saying, is this really what I want my life to look like? And as I started to work with people individually and starting to coach them on career development and burnout prevention and leadership development, I started to see this theme of people wanting clarity, people wanting a plan and to really How do they prevent burnout? How do they build a career in life that they love? How is it that when they hit roadblocks, how can they overcome them? And so I said, you know what? I have a lot of this knowledge, not only from my own personal experience, but I put a lot of research in the book in the well. So each chapter is a story, and then the learning lessons that I learned along the way, and then there's practical strategies, and they're all backed up by research as well. So that's the flow of the book.
That's amazing. I'm excited to dive into the book for sure, but I want to pause and I want to look at all these events that happen. Really, you said March 6th, March 13th. Your husband had just come back. Now you leave this organization. What were some of your, I don't know if we call them coping strategies. I don't know if we call them skills. I don't know if we call them personal development. We call them whatever the hell it was that allowed you to continue to move forward. You said it's a choice, but I really want to give the audience like a glimpse into, holy shit, man, my whole world just got thrown upside down, right?
Yeah.
I'm so glad my husband's back, but we had a routine going. Now he's back, and now that changes. Then I lose my mom. World shuts down. Toxic work environment. Like, that's a lot going on. It's great to say, hey, great. Danielle, have some grit, but it's a lot. So what were you doing to show up, to perform at all the things that you're supposed to do as a mom, as a wife, as a corporate employee? I mean, you're wearing a lot of hats. What did you do? Because I've been in those shoes, and it can be overwhelming. And I really want to, I guess, let the audience know, if you're going through something challenging, here's some tangible things you could do. And this is what got me through it.
So I would say I'm able to speak about it now because it's been 4 years since this all happened. But if you would have talked to me then, I felt lost. I felt confused. I had tied my identity to my paycheck, to earning sales awards, to being the senior region manager of a Fortune 500 company. I had tied my identity to this. And I've always been highly motivated by money. And the reason being is because money has always given me the freedom to break free from the manipulation that I often was experiencing with my mom. So to me, money was freedom. Also, I'm a big believer that the more money you make, the more money you can give. So it's always been a motivation of mine. So when I left corporate and I felt like, what am I going to do now? I was having panic attacks, and I was really just kind of looking at my life and going, I don't know what I want to do. And how am I going to recover from this? So I don't want to paint this picture like this was easy. This was really, really hard. But also, I did have the strategies to overcome a lot of this because 2 years prior to this, or 2.5 years prior to this, I had battled postpartum depression. And while I was battling postpartum depression, my twins were born 6 weeks early. They were in the NICU. Right after they were born, we were hit by a Category 5 hurricane where we lost power. That's a whole nother story. That's in the book. Whole nother story. But I took 16 weeks of cognitive behavioral therapy. And so I learned during that time what practical strategies were going to help me. And I applied them during the year that my husband was deployed, and I applied them right after that 6-month period. So I knew that I needed to break things down one day at a time. There's value in focusing on the future, but really taking it when you're in when you're in a point of despair or you're going through a challenging time, taking it one day at a time. So I know that exercise increases endorphins. So every morning I would wake up and I would say, okay, what are my top 3 priorities for the day? What is it that I can do to take care of myself? What is it that I can do to take care of my family? And what is it that I can do to maybe take care of my career and have that moving forward? So I would exercise and I would get the endorphins going. I would listen to a motivating podcast or read a book or listen to upbeat music. Even today, I don't touch my phone for the first hour and a half of my day. I wake up before my kids get up because I like to I like to take care of myself first, kind of wake up, grab my cup of coffee, sit down for 5 minutes before I go and wake up my kids. Then I spend time with them. then I exercise, and then I listen to music while I'm getting ready. I don't touch my phone for the first hour and a half of my day because I believe the first hour of your day sets the intention of your day. I also, when I was thinking about what do I want my life to look like in the future, it was really interesting that when my mom passed away, I had to write her obituary. And that's that's hard to do, especially when you're trying. I know you know from your own experience, which my sincere condolences on the passing of your father, and the way that he did, and what you've had to deal with. But writing that obituary is tough. And when I was writing it, I started to think about my own life and thinking about what would I want people to say about me when my time passes? What do I want my kids to say about me? And I started to think that because I wanted to say, how do I want to show up in this world? And I actually wrote my own obituary from the perspective of a colleague and the perspective of a family member. And why I did that was I identified when I'm working with organizations, we do a core values exercise where we narrow down into about 5 to 7 core values. So I took my core values and then I wrote an obituary from each of their perspectives. And I did that because I wanted to look at what's the legacy that I want to leave. When it's time for me to come, how is it that I want people to feel when I'm with them, when I'm not with them? Like, how do I want to show up in this world? And that became the guiding light and getting me through and looking at what my future was going to look like and what I was going to be doing.
I've worked with a lot of corporations. I've done similar values exercises. I've never taken it that perspective. That's really interesting. And I see the power in that for sure. I want to rewind just a moment to you're crushing it in the corporate world. And it sounds like, look, man, accolades are coming in, the money is flowing, like not easy street, but it's a cush gig, man. I like what's happening. Corporate takeover, toxic work environment. I guess what I'm looking for is what was the switch? What was the change? And what would you suggest? Because you made the choice, the decision to say, nope, I know my value. My value is far greater. I just went through this. I wrote my own obituary. Like, this doesn't align with me, man. It just doesn't. So I'm moving forward. But man, I'm leaving whatever the number was, several $100,000.
Oh yeah, it was
7 figures,
six-figure commission, 6-figure salary, company car, stock options. I was leaving a lot on the table.
Yeah, so you're leaving this all. I guess my question is, how did that look for you? Because you're, like you said, my identity's tied to a degree, but I know I'm not aligned and I'm not going to live my life this way. Take me through that mindset of where you finally said, you know what? Thank you for the time. I'm moving forward. What'd that look like for you?
I had a employee that was on my team that was creating a very toxic culture. This individual had 10 customer complaints in 1 year. She was becoming negative on the team. And I was reaching out to HR on a consistent basis. In fact, one person on my team had shared with me that this individual had a target on my back. She said that to me in confidence. And so I reached out to HR and I said, what do I do? I've never been in this situation where I have somebody who's got such negativity that her own team doesn't want to talk to her, that I'm getting customer complaint after customer complaint after customer complaint. And their advice to me was, you need to spend more time with her. I said, okay, well, every time I schedule a co-travel with her, because I covered 5 states, so she was in another state. Every time I schedule a co-travel with her, she says that her customers cancel at the last minute. And so then I'm basically spending my time flying up there and not able to meet with customers. And it was because she didn't want me meeting with the customers because they were all complaining about her, because they would all tell me, the customers would call me. And I just didn't feel supported by the HR. And it was getting to the point where it's so toxic that I lost my confidence. I wasn't showing up as a good manager. This individual was lying about what I was as a manager. I mean, there was ridiculous lies, like I didn't give her a merit increase. And clearly in human resources, you can see if there's a merit increase, just a bunch of different claims that were, and I just said, why am I going to work for an organization that is not giving me the support that I need to be successful in my role? I don't want to be here anymore. And I wasn't the only manager that left. There was a lot of managers. I mean, I know people that have left after 30 years with the organization, 25 years with the organization, 14 years with the organization, that left the company because they didn't feel like the human resources team was advocating for their managers. They were letting the hens run the hen house. And it didn't matter what we were saying that we needed help with.
I'm curious because obviously the path you've chosen is we can do better. You probably experience good teams. Then you go through this. It sounds like it was pretty quick. 6 months, you're like, no, dude, like not happening, not feeling this. I guess what my question is, are you glad you went through that so that it makes you a better coach to the groups you're working with now? Or are you like, no, man, we could have skipped all that and I could still be cruising at my corporate job?
That's a good question, because I believe I ask myself that question on a consistent basis, on a daily basis. I mean, there's aspects there's aspects of it where I feel like I was kind of traumatized by it. I mean, obviously, like, I try not to be a victim of my circumstances, but it was a pretty traumatic experience. And I felt like I had put so much time and effort into, and I worked ridiculous hours for that organization, because I'm motivated by it. I mean, it's my own drive within me. So, I mean, it's not like they expected of me. I just always like to do more. But I felt like I had dedicated so many years and it wasn't reciprocated on the support in the end. So there was anger, there was frustration. And then at the same time, I look at that circumstance and say, you know what, though, if that didn't happen, and it wasn't that toxic environment was actually like a year in the making with that particular individual employee. I mean, it happened, it'd been going on for a while. And then the combination of all the things that took place in a 6-month period just kind of amplified everything. But I look back and go, if it wasn't for that situation, I wouldn't have written a book. I wouldn't have a podcast. I wouldn't have a business. I wouldn't be here spending more time with my kids than I ever have before. I was traveling all the time. I've taken more vacations in the past 3 years than I probably did in my past 7 years. So there's aspects that I miss. I miss working in a team environment. I miss there's aspects about the culture that I missed. And let's just be honest, entrepreneurship is really, really hard. I felt like I was starting all over again. There's aspects that I had to learn about running a business that I had never done before. And that part's been really hard. But then there's also been a lot of blessings through this journey as well. So, I mean, it's a question I ask myself all the time, and I try to focus on the good things when I ever experience that doubt.
I guess what I would say is every time you're getting your ass kicked, guys, try and say thank you because there is something good coming from it. I promise. It doesn't feel like that, but every time I've experienced something really negative, whether it be losing my dad or having business partners steal money, somehow there is that lining, that silver lining, and it ends up being really, I guess it's what was supposed to happen, which sounds so morbid, but it honestly is. It's like, yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. Let's get back into some of these roadblocks because again, we won't break them all down because I want people to go get the book. But what are a couple of these major roadblocks where you're like, dude, this is standing between you and your dream life, and if you could just look at it, in the mirror. What are a couple of those roadblocks that we can talk about from the book to kind of get people really to, wanting to go grab that thing? Because look, like I said, I love the name. You've clearly persevered through some challenging times, several of them throughout your life. What are some of these roadblocks that are facing people that, and maybe they know it, maybe they don't, but if they knew it, they could go get their dream life?
Resistance to change. So resistance to change, a lot of times our natural chemistry is not designed to embrace change. In fact, we're naturally designed to resist change. And the reason being is because it's a protective mechanism within ourselves so that we're protecting ourselves from danger. So a lot of times we are resistant to change, but change can be good if we're willing to take risks and bet on ourselves and understand that there's going to be hard times. Change is not easy. But when we do experience the change, that's when we grow the most. That's when we learn the most, when we're willing to take risks and bet on ourselves. And it's not going to be easy, but if I don't want to stay stagnant in my life, I want to continue to grow and learn. And the only way to really do that is when we embrace change. So I would say fear of change is one of the roadblocks. Another roadblock is imposter syndrome. Now, imposter syndrome was coined in 1970 as experiencing self-doubt, and it's particularly with high achievers. So it's interesting that the people that are the highest achievers experience the most self-doubt. And a lot of times it comes in our career. If we're going for a promotion, we might start to compare ourselves and saying, well, I'm not prepared for that particular promotion. I don't have the right skill sets. I don't have the right experience for that particular role. Instead of looking at, well, what are the transferable skills that I have for that particular role? Or I don't want to start the business because I don't have XYZ qualifications. Okay, well, let's look at what you have done in your career and how has that set you up for success to try something new. And you can still learn through the process. But imposter syndrome is a really big roadblock that I see a lot of people experiencing when they're going for a new job, a promotion, or starting a business.
Did you experience it when you wrote the book?
I've experienced it throughout my whole starting the business. When I at first, when I left corporate, I was looking for a job. And I have every intention of looking for a job. What I started to do was I started to develop my brand on LinkedIn. And I started to post. And as I was starting to build my brand on LinkedIn, because I wanted to really position myself more to attract job opportunities and spend the time wasting the time applying to jobs online. Well, as my brand started to grow, people started to reach out to me and say, "Can I hire you as a career coach? Can you guide me through the interview process?" And I just remember this moment of going, "Who am I? First off, what is a career coach?" I have never heard of that. Sure wish I would have known about career coaches when I started, when I started my career. And second of that, like, what qualifications do I have to be a career coach? And it's interesting because when I look back at my resume and go, well, wait a minute. Well, instead of thinking about what I don't have, let's look about what I do have and how has it prepared me for this particular position. I have 15 years of experience working in the medical device and medical sales industry. I have 7 years leading and building high performing teams. I have built training and development programs within the organization for emerging leaders. I have been exposed to some of the top trainings in the world because the company that I worked for really invested time in the professional development of their employees. So I am more than qualified to do this, but for some reason I had this imposter syndrome that I needed. I don't know what I thought I needed to be called a career coach or to be a speaker. Even to be a speaker, I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm prepared to be a speaker. And I was like, wait a minute. I have 15 years in sales. That's all I did was speak. I've spoken in front of 1,500 of my closest colleagues. Now, there's still skill sets that I need to develop, like how to craft a keynote and how to have good stage presence and how to articulate and pronunciate and body language. I mean, there's so much that goes into delivering a powerful and impactful keynote, but that can be learned. But there's a lot of skills that I've learned along the way that has prepared me for it. So instead of thinking about what you don't have, let's start thinking about what skill sets that you do have that have prepared you for this next step in what you're taking.
Yeah, really sharing your gifts. I mean, that's the idea, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
like stop thinking about yourself and stop being selfish is how what I heard. Like, look, yes, there are things I could work on. However, if I don't share these gifts, I'm actually being really selfish because of all this amazing experience that I've learned. It's almost my duty to share it. So I love that.
Oh,
Talk
I
to me
love the
about
way you position that.
yeah, it's something that I've experienced too, right?
Yeah.
Sharing your gifts. I'll give you an example, and then we'll
Mm-hmm.
go get back to you. But I love to dance. I grew up dancing, the 6'5", 250-pound white dude that can dance. It is what it is, man. Like, but I grew up dancing in the basement with my mom and my brother to Michael Jackson every single night, every night. And people love when I dance for whatever reason. But maybe because I just don't care, maybe because I'm truly just I'm in my element. But for years, I wouldn't do it. My wife was like, "Why?" And I was like, "Babe, I don't want to make it about me." And she's like, "No, no, no. You are making it about you right now because you're not sharing. You're taking joy away from people." And when she said that, I was like, "Oh, you're right." Finally, it clicked after
Mhm.
years. So that's what I heard when you said that story. I was like, "Oh yeah, she figured out all the gifts she has, and
You
she's
dance,
now given."
you dancing probably gives people the courage to dance because
Oh
they
yeah,
see you being free and having fun and they're like, "Oh, I may not be as good of a dancer, but you probably spark the joy so much out of it that people want to do dancing and that's why you inspire them to do it."
whatever it is, it's something that I enjoy. So why sit on the sideline and not do something that you love? Just like I'm sure your experience as a career coach or whatever title you put on it, you are good at these things. You enjoy them. Why not do it? And hey, let's get paid for it. Now I don't
Yeah.
get paid to dance, so we're clear. But let's talk about high performance teams. What have you found? You had mentioned core values, and I'm
Mhm.
huge on that as well. I'm curious, when you look at great teams, what is really at the core? What's the DNA of these teams? What are the things, the attributes that they have versus teams that were toxic, as you mentioned? It sounds like you've experienced
Mhm.
both, but let's focus on the positive. When you look at a team and you're like, yes, these guys are going to go crush it. What do they have?
I believe it starts with hiring the right people right from the beginning. So in sales, there was my 3 T's to hiring top talent. It was what were the immediate needs of the territory? So it was specifically in sales. Was this a territory that had a lot of key opinion leaders? And with this individual, would I need somebody that's a little bit more experienced? Or was this an emerging and growth territory that I could take a little bit more of a risk and hire somebody that didn't have as much experience, but they had the characteristics like grit, like determination, resilience, and tenacity? I definitely hire not based off of experience. I more or less hire off of the intangible characteristics because you can teach somebody products, you can teach somebody sales processes, but you can't teach somebody to wake up every single morning and have the motivation to go out there and hit the ground running. So I looked at the territory. Then I looked at what were the immediate needs of the team. I didn't want everybody on the team to have the same skill sets. So I looked at different skill sets depending on what my team had. If I needed somebody with a strong marketing background, did I need somebody that had a strong business development background? Did I need somebody that had a strong um, analytical background? I wanted the team to be diverse so that collectively we could lean on each other and grow. And then my last T is time. For me, I was in outside sales. And so I would go and spend a day to 2 days with each person on my team, and I would go and co-travel with them. And for me, time is, can I sit in the car with somebody for 8 hours and actually enjoy the conversation? Because if I can't, it's not going to be a fun co-travel. So I think that there was my 3 T's to hiring top talent in sales. And then the other one is when you truly take the time to understand each individual person on your team. What are their core values? What motivates them? What inspires them? What's their why? What's their purpose? What personality assessments can you give them? So I'm certified in DISC. And so understanding where they are within the DISC model helps me understand where their strengths and where their growth opportunities are. Also, the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace. How do they feel appreciated? And ensuring that you're really delivering the appreciation that's for that individual. So I believe that after you hire the right people for the team, then you take the time to get to know each person on their team, their family members, their kids' names. then that's when you can really tap into what inspire and motivates them. And that's how you build high performing teams.
Yeah, and you notice, guys, that she mentioned she's doing these. She calls it co-travel. I call it ride-alongs. You can call it whatever the
Mhm.
heck you want, but spending time. What's interesting, I'm guessing, just because similar background to doing this, your high performers were the ones that you got to know the best, that you got to know about their kids and their family and their dreams and aspirations versus the people that just arm's length, they typically don't perform as well. Now, so we're not putting it on the salespeople. It also comes down to you letting them in.
Mhm.
Talk about that, because this is my first book. I talked about vulnerability as being the most important leadership lesson I learned. I didn't do it well in my first company and a half, in my opinion. Really kept people at arm's length, didn't let people in, and then broke wide open. How is that for you, especially in the corporate
Mm.
environment? Was that a tool that you used to really say, "Hey, or get to know who I am," or do you have a little bit more of a shell? I'm just curious how it looked for you.
It's interesting that you say vulnerability because I am in 100% agreement with you that vulnerability is one of the most powerful attributes and characteristics within leadership. Majority of I would say majority of my life, majority of my career, I wasn't vulnerable. I was very guarded. In fact, when they did a 360 performance review and they interviewed, oh gosh, what is it, like 23 people? Not only it was everybody that reported to me, everybody that was my peer, and then also people in other divisions, and then my management team. So I believe that there was 23 people that took a survey on me and then also had open feedback. And some of the feedback that was on there is Danielle is very guarded. And the reason being is I believe it has a lot to do with my upbringing, that I didn't want to be vulnerable because I didn't want to be hurt. And I was scared of how people would perceive me. And I wanted to be liked because it came down to that wanting to be worthy, and that wanting of like unconditional love was showing up as me and a leader and wanting to be liked, wanting to prove myself. And it wasn't until I got that 360 performance review when I said, wow, I am so sick and tired of people saying that I am guarded. I thought that I was being vulnerable, but clearly I was not vulnerable. And so I really had to remove the layers and start to be honest with my team of like, hey, am I'm burnt out right now, and being honest and saying it. I've got a vacancy going on right now. I've got somebody who's interviewing for a promotion right now. At one point, I had 4 vacancies out of the 8 people on my team because people were getting promoted into new roles, which is great. That's what you want. You want promotions on your team. But that also puts a lot on the manager when you're trying to manage a team and vacancies and hiring, and being honest with your team and saying, I'm burnt out right now. And I know that this is a temporary situation. I know that we'll get our team back going, but like, wow, this is hard. And what I found is when you're open and you're honest and you're vulnerable with your team, it gives them the permission to be vulnerable with you. And the more that you are honest with each other, the more you can support each other. So vulnerability, I agree with you, is one of the most powerful things in leadership.
Yeah, I hope more people take advantage of it. It's free to you, right? Just to let people in. And I know the fear, oh, they're going to take advantage. And some will, by the way. So we're clear. Some will. The toxic person that she talked about, they're going to take advantage of it.
Oh, yeah.
However, the majority will support and your growth will accelerate. I just looked down. We have ripped through this episode. If people want to connect with you, they want Danielle more in their life. They want unstoppable grit. Where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Best place to connect is on my podcast, Unstoppable Grit Podcast with Danielle Cobo. And then I'm on all social media platforms, but LinkedIn's my favorite.
Well, thank you. You showed up vulnerably, immediately out of the gate, and I got a ton out of this for sure. And I'm just so grateful to have met and spent time with you. And by the way, guys, I'm going to be on our show, so definitely go check it out. But thank you, Danielle. You're awesome.
Thank you.
You guys, I mean, look, she shared all that happened with her mom, her dad, the business partners, the toxic relationships. I mean, there's something for everyone in this episode. We didn't get to the business side till later. So make sure to share this out, like and subscribe, get this out. More people need to hear Danielle's story. Go grab the book. And until next time, remember, your mindset matters. I appreciate you all so very much.